Did you know that John Wayne Gacy, a noted American serial killer, raised up to $10,000 for Todd Phillips' first documentary titled Hated Gigi Allen and the Murder Junkies? Also, Allen said himself, I would have became a serial killer too if it weren't for music. Also, in 1974, there were at least 5 active serial killers, including the BTK killer, John Wayne Gacy, and Ted Bundy. Those interesting topics and more, along with his natal chart breakdown on this episode. This is Astrology Games here. Thank you to all who support me and who have came back to this channel. Let's get into it. The natal chart and documentary of John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, March 17, 1942 through May 10, 1994, Pisces Sun, Moon, and Mercury, was an American serial killer and sex offender who raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy regularly performed at children's hospitals and charitable events as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown, personas that he had devised himself. He became known as the Killer Clown due to his public appearances and services as the clown prior to the discovery of his crimes. Gacy committed all of his murders inside a ranch-style house near Norridge, a village Norwood Park Township in suburban Chicago. Typically, he would lure victims to his home and dupe into thinking that they were under a magic trick, putting their hands together in handcuffs. He would then rape and torture his captive before killing him by either asphyxiation or strangulation with a garrote. 26 victims were buried in the crawl space of his home, and 3 others were buried elsewhere on his property. 4 were discarded in the Des Plaines River. Gacy was convicted of sodomy of a teenage boy in Waterloo, Iowa in 1968 and was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment but only served 18 months. He murdered his first victim in 1972, had murdered twice more by the end of 75, and murdered at least 30 subsequent victims after his divorce from his second wife in 1976. The investigation into the disappearance of Des Plaines teenager Robert Peast led to Gacy's arrest on December 21, 1978. His conviction for 33 murders by one individual then covered the most homicides in the United States legal history. Gacy was sentenced to that of death on March 13, 1980. On death row at Menard Correctional Center, he spent much of his time painting. He was executed by lethal injection at Statesville Correctional Center on May 10, 1994. Early life. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17, 1942, a Pisces Sun, Moon, and Mercury. He's the second child and only son of John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robeson. His father was an auto repair machinist and a World War I veteran. His mother, a homemaker. Gacy was close to his mother and 2 sisters, but endured a difficult relationship with his father, who was an alcoholic and was physically abusive to his family. His father also belittled him, calling him dumb and stupid, comparing him unfavorably to his sisters. One of Gacy's earliest memories with his father was him beating him with a leather belt for accidentally disarranging components of a car engine he had assembled. His mother tried to shield her son of his father's abuse, which only resulted in an accusation that he was a sissy and a mama's boy, who would probably grow up a queer. Despite this mistreatment, however, Gacy still loved his father, and he never felt good enough in his father's eyes. In 1949, Gacy's father was informed that his son, John Wayne Gacy, and another boy had been caught sexually fondling a young girl. His father whipped him with a razor strop as punishment. The same year, a family friend and contractor would molest Gacy in his truck repeatedly. Gacy never told his father about this, fearing that his father would blame him. One of Gacy's high school friends recalled several instances where his father even ridiculed or beat his son without provocation. On one occasion in 1957, he witnessed Gacy's father emerging from the family basement drunk, belittling and hitting his son for no apparent reason. Gacy's mother always stopped to intervene as her son always just simply put his hands up to defend himself. According to the friend, Gacy never struck his father back during these altercations. Let's get into the career origins of Gacy. In 1960, at age 18, Gacy became involved with politics, working as an assistant precinct captain for the Democratic Party in his neighborhood. Same year of Gacy's political involvement began, his father bought him a car. He kept the vehicle's title in his own name until Gacy had finished paying for it. These monthly payments took several years for him to complete. His father would confiscate the keys to the vehicle if Gacy did not do as he said. In 1962, Gacy purchased his own extra set of keys after his father confiscated the original set. In response, his father removed the distributor cap, keeping the component for 3 days. Gacy's recalling he felt totally sick and drained after this incident. Hours after his father replaced the distributor cap, Gacy left home to drive to Las Vegas. He found work within an ambulance service before he was transferred to work as an attendant at Palm Mortuary. As a mortuary attendant, Gacy slept on a cot behind an embalming room. He worked there for 3 months, observing morticians embalming dead bodies and occasionally serving as a pallbearer. Gacy later confessed that one evening while alone, he had clambered into a coffin of a deceased teenage male, embracing and caressing the body before experiencing a sense of shock. This prompted Gacy to call his mother the next day and ask his father whether he would allow him to return home. His father agreed, and the same day he drove back to Chicago. Upon returning home, Gacy enrolled at Northwestern Business College despite having failed graduating from high school. He graduated in 1963 and took a management trainee position with the Nunn Bush Shoe Company. The shoe company transferred him to Springfield, Illinois to work as a salesman, and eventually promoted him to a manager in his department. During their courtship, Gacy joined the local JCs and worked tirelessly for them, being named key man in April 1964. The same year, he had his second homosexual experience. According to Gacy, after one of his colleagues in Springfield plied him with drinks and invited him to spend the evening on his sofa, he agreed. The colleague then performed oral sex on him while he was drunk. By 1965, Gacy had risen to the position of vice president within the Springfield JCs. The same year, he was named the third most outstanding JC in the state of Illinois. After a 6-month courtship, Gacy and Myers married in September 1964. Marilyn's father purchased 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken spots / restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. The couple moved there so Gacy could manage the restaurants, with the understanding that they would move into her parents' house / former home once it was over, which had been vacated for the couple. The offer was lucrative. Gacy would receive $15,000 per year, the equivalent of about $134,000 a year in 2022, plus the share of the restaurant's profits. Following the obligatory completion of a management course, Gacy relocated to Waterloo with his wife. He opened a club in his basement where his employees could drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employed teenagers of both sexes at his restaurants, he socialized only with the young men. Gacy gave them drinks of alcohol before he made any sexual advances. If they rebuffed him, he would claim his advances were simply jokes or tests on their morals. Gacy's wife gave birth to a son in February 1966 and a daughter in March 1967. Gacy later described this period of his life as perfect. He had finally earned his father's approval. When Gacy's parents paid for a family visit in July of 1966, his father apologized for the physical and emotional abuse he inflicted on his son throughout his childhood and adolescence, before happily saying, "Son, I was so wrong about you," as he shook his hand. In Waterloo, Gacy joined the local JC's chapter, regularly offering extended hours to the organization, to addition of the 12 and 14-hour days he worked managing the 3 KFC restaurants. At meetings, Gacy often provided fried chicken and insisted on being called colonel. He and other Waterloo JCs were deeply involved with wife swapping, prostitution, pornography, and drug abuse. Although Gacy was considered ambitious and something of a bragger, the other JCs held him in high regard for his fundraising work, and in 1967 named him an outstanding vice president of the Waterloo JCs. In August of 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, a son of a fellow JC. Gacy lured Voorhees to his house upon promise of showing him heterosexual stag films regularly played at JC events. Gacy plied Voorhees with alcohol, allowing him to watch a stag movie and then persuading him to have mutual sex, adding, "You have to have sex with a man before you have sex with a woman." Over the following months, Gacy similarly abused several other youths, including one whom he encouraged to have sex with his own wife before blackmailing him into having oral sex on him. He tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct sexual experiments, homosexual might I add, in the interest of scientific research, and paid them up to $50 each. In March of 1968, Voorhees reported to his father that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Voorhees Sr. immediately informed the police, who arrested Gacy and subsequently charged him with oral sodomy on Voorhees and attempted to assault a 16-year-old named Edward Lynch. Gacy vehemently denied these charges and allegations and demanded to take a polygraph test. The results indicated that John Wayne Gacy was nervous when he denied any wrongdoing in relation to both these young men. Gacy publicly denied any wrongdoing and insisted that the charges against him were politically motivated. Voorhees Sr. had opposed Gacy's nomination for appointment as president of the Iowa JCs. Several fellow JCs found Gacy's story credible and rallied to his support. However, on May 10, 1968, Gacy was indicted on the sodomy charge. The most striking aspect of the test results is the patient's total denial of responsibility for anything that has happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He represents himself as a victim of circumstances and blames others who are out to get him. The patient attempts to assure a sympathetic response by depicting himself at the mercy of a hostile environment. Section of report detailing Gacy's 1968 psychiatric evaluation. On August 30 of 1968, Gacy persuaded one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, to physically assault Voorhees in an attempt to discourage the boy from testifying against him in court. Gacy promised to pay Schroeder $300. Schroeder agreed. In early September, he lured Voorhees to an isolated country park, sprayed mace in his eyes, and beat him. Voorhees escaped and reported it to the police, identifying Schroeder as his attacker. They arrested him on the following day. While initially denying any involvement, Schroeder soon confessed to the assault, indicating that it was done upon Gacy's request. Police arrested Gacy and laid an additional charge of hiring Schroeder to assault and intimidate Voorhees against him. On September 12th, Gacy was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at the Psychiatric Hospital of the University of Iowa. 2 doctors examined him over a period of 17 days, including that he had antisocial personality disorder, the clinical term for sociopath or psychopath, and was unlikely to benefit from any therapy or medical treatment, and that his behavior pattern was likely to bring him a repeated conflict with society. The doctors concluded that he was mentally competent to stand trial. Mugshots of Gacy following his December 1968 sodomy conviction. On November 7, 1968, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomy in relation to Voorhees, but not guilty to the charge related to other use. Gacy claimed that Voorhees had offered himself up and he had acted out of curiosity. His story was not believed. Gacy was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. That same day, Gacy's wife petitioned for a divorce, requesting she be awarded the couple's home and property, sole custody of their 2 children, and alimony. The court ruled in her favor and the divorce was finalized on September 18, 1969. Gacy never saw his wife or children again. During his incarceration in the Anamosa State Penitentiary, Gacy rapidly acquired a reputation as a model prisoner. Within a few months, he already rose to the position of head cook. He also joined the inmate Gacy chapter and increased the members from 50 to 260 to 650 men in less than 18 months. Gacy also secured an increase in the inmates' daily pay in the prison mess hall and supervised several projects to improve conditions for inmates in prison. By summer of 1969, Gacy had overseen the installment of a miniature golf and prison recreation yards. In June of 1969, he was denied parole. To prepare for a second scheduled parole hearing in 1970 of May, he completed 6 high school courses, which he obtained his diploma in November of 1969. On Christmas Day, 1969, Gacy's father died from cirrhosis of the liver. When informed of his father's death, he collapsed to the floor, sobbing, requesting supervised compassionate leave to attend his father's funeral. The request was denied. Gacy was granted parole within 12 months of probation on June 18, 1970, after serving 18 months of his 10-year sentence. Conditions of his probation included that Gacy relocate to Chicago to live with his mother, that he must observe a 10 p.m. curfew also. February 12, 1971, Gacy was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage boy who claimed that he had lured him into the car at a Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal and had driven him into his home, where he attempted to have sex with the boy. The court dismissed his order and complaint once the boy failed to appear to court. On June 22nd, Gacy was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual battery and reckless misconduct. The arrest was in response to the complaint filed by the youth who claimed that Gacy had flashed a sheriff's badge, lured him into the car, and forced him to perform oral sex. The Iowa Board of Parole did not learn these incidents, and 8 months later in 1971, in October, Gacy's parole ended. The following month, the records of Gacy's previous criminal convictions in Iowa were sealed.